Kristina Lopez Adduci. How's it going?
It's going good, Kevin. How are you?
I'm doing well. A fellow Latina, within the Latino
Yeah,
community. Yes, Carrillo, my last name. It's Spanish, and then I've got
love to see
my
it.
my mom's side, which is Mexican, and I frequently bring this up with Latinx guests, right? And that is like, what's the beef with the stigma? Like in the culture, right? Like
Oh yeah.
cannabis is the worst thing, it seems like. And they, our parents and their parents, they just don't want us touching it. Did you get the same,
No,
feeling growing up?
Abuela would never, God rest her soul. I mean, when she was alive, she thought our one hitter was a lipstick holder. And I was like, yes, Grandma, Abuela, yes, it's a lipstick holder. Let's roll with it.
Right, right. What's that movie where they're like, "What is this? It's a bong." It's really. He's like, "It's a lamp. You put the shade on top of it." Yeah. And are you Puerto Rican? Is that right?
100%.
Okay, Puerto Rican. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm glad I'm not the only one, and that seems to be echoing throughout our upbringing. So did you get a lot of that growing up? I mean, what's your relationship with cannabis? Did it happen early on? Like what?
No, it didn't. I mean, I was a dare kid, right? Grew up in a strict Puerto Rican household. I lived with my parents. Grew up an only child, but I also lived with my grandparents who were Pentecostal pastors. So
Ooh,
if you know
wow.
anything about the Pentecostal church,
I don't. No.
I mean, like they are a very strict part of the church. And it was, no sex, drugs, or rock and roll for me. Like no fun, you
Right.
know,
Walk the
and
straight and narrow.
as I grew up, I realized, oh yeah, like my cousins and aunts and uncles were all consuming cannabis, but I never touched, I even in college, goody two shoes, never.
Wow. Well, then, so I'm curious, and we're gonna jump ahead, but we'll go back because I'll kind of keep us on track here. But
Yeah.
like, when did you build a relationship with the plant? When did all that go down?
So I went to college, went to grad school, didn't consume. And then I got my first job at the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's research. And
Wow.
that was sort of the first time I heard about cannabis being used for therapeutic and medicinal purposes, right, for Parkinson's patients. And I was like, that's interesting. My mom's a physician. So I started to like ask some questions, do my own research. But it wasn't until I dealt with my own health issues, really bad anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder, most of my adult life, where I was like, okay, big pharma, step aside for a second. Let's try this plan. And then that was it. I never looked back.
So that one experience when you consumed, you felt like a world of difference. And was it because I kind of had the same experience as well? And it's like, oh, why have I not like done this before? Like I
Yeah,
feel so much better, right?
exactly. It was like this wave came over me and I was like, oh, everything just makes so much more sense now. And like the noise in my head and the things that were
Yeah.
keeping me up just sort of like dulled out. And the beautiful thing about my first experience was, yes, I got to consume, it was a bong rip out of a really dirty, ugly, phallic, masculine, confusing bong. And that's where sort of House of Puff started. My first experience
Wow.
with cannabis. And I was like, wait a minute, like, where's all the beautiful stuff? Like, I'm not smoking any of that. Like, I'm a well-to-do New Yorker. I have an art magazine. Like, where are my other options here?
You're like, we could, and if not, we could do much better. There's a gap, right? Okay. So that's perfect. That's a good tee up. So I understand that your background is in art and fashion. And so I want to talk about that. But before we do, I saw on a podcast that you mentioned you were a graduate in political science, which so am
Yeah.
I. So
Yes,
virtual
poli
sci virtual high five. But here's the thing. I laughed, I chuckled when I was doing my homework watching that, because you said, yeah, I quickly realized that I was not gonna be in. And again, I had the same thing. Like I went to college, I had one kind of internship on Capitol Hill, and
Mhm.
it was more on the news side, but still, like you were covering politics. I was like rooming with guys that were working for like senators and stuff.
Yeah.
And I just quickly was like, oh, that's a mess. There's a lot like, and it's more of
What's going
like just
on?
acting. Like there's no, it's not as skill driven as opposed to like who you know, who you are, and like,
Right.
I don't know. So
There's no heart
yeah. And so I'm curious, what
most of
was
the
your
time.
reason why of walking away from it?
So I worked for a senator, and I had an experience that I just quickly realized that I was too much of an empath. Like I wanted to, anybody who called the senator's office, I wanted to give them a solution, right? I wanted to help them. And that's just not how it works. And
Right.
I thought, oh shit, am I too sensitive for politics? And so when I graduated from William Patterson, and I got a master's degree in international affairs, had a job offer at the UN. And I was like, oh, the UN. But then I was like, no, this is going to be the same thing where I'm going to feel like I'm not doing enough because of bureaucracy or whatever it is.
Right.
Um, and I just thought, no, listen, I'm still very much immersed in politics. Like every day, the first thing I read is all,
Sure.
in the news. But as a career trajectory, I knew there was something bigger for me in store.
Yeah, and I gotta commend you because I think you fall into a small percentage where there's people that recognize a career path, and then they actually take action to not do it. So in this case, you dodged a bullet. It's good. You're this CEO and founder of House of Puff. We're talking on Cannabinoid Connect today. So it all worked out, Kristina. And that's where I want to get back to what we were saying, your background in art and fashion. So how did that influence, founding House of Puff? I know that you said you had that one experience, but from there, with that light bulb moment, kind of where did you go from there?
Yeah, so I realized a few things during that experience. One, that I loved cannabis immediately. I was like, okay, sold. But there had to be other women out there who felt like me, right? Like we are, we take, as women or anybody, we take pride in how we look, the things are in our home. And I thought, okay, this bong is confusing as hell. It's black and blue, and like, it's like, was just ugly, right?
Right, right.
And living in New York City, went down to St. Mark's. I was like, what are my options here? And it's like all these head shops. And I was like, again, like what? There was such a disconnect, right?
It's
And
not
so,
very inviting for a female to like walk in. I'm not speaking for every
no,
female, but I'm just saying I'm sure there's some that are like it's intimidating, or it's just not their style or whatever, right?
right.
Like
And listen, there are a lot of gals and girls out there who love that vibe, and that just wasn't my vibe. So
sure.
I asked my friends who I knew were consuming, I was like, what are your rituals? Like, what do you do? And a lot of them were like, after work, instead of a glass of wine, I'll take a bath, take a shower, light a joint, light a one hitter. So then that's when I was like, all right, I have all of these artists that I've interviewed, right? Because I've had a magazine. So I left the Michael J. Fox Foundation, started my art magazine because I'm an art collector, and I knew there was like a gap of information for young art collectors to find out what do they like, where should they be going in Brooklyn to find emerging artists and what have you.
Mhm.
I started a young patrons group at the American Folk Art Museum. So I was very
Wow.
immersed in it. So I was like, wait a minute, why don't I just put two and two together? And the artists that I work with and have ever met or interviewed with, couple that with who wants to create some beautiful, badass, chic smoking accessories for me and the women that I know. So that's how it all began. I launched an
Wow.
MVP, and it came with a one hitter. We teamed up with Joya, a fragrance studio out in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, and everything came with instructions, because that was the other thing I was hearing. Okay, great. Like I'm a newish consumer, right? I'm out of the canna closet. Here I
Right.
am. This one hitter seems easy. Can't roll a joint yet. Like what, how do I
Right.
even light a one hitter? What end do I light? And so I think our West Coast counterparts, they're like, what, are you crazy? Because they've been consuming
It's
for
natural.
way
It's
before we
normal.
have.
Right,
Yeah, it's
right,
normal for
right.
them. And it's
The
not
consumer adoption's been there. Yeah.
exactly. And so right off the bat, I was like, everything has to come with instructions. And then from there, it just sort of blew up. And this was just like a testing ground for me. And then when I realized, I was like, Cheddar TV asked me to go on, and I was like, oh my God, is this like, am I going to be in the cannabis industry now? So I sold my art magazine because, investors and everybody, people who believe in you, they don't want you running two companies. So I had to
Right.
choose.
That is incredible. So, that's the true kind of nature of someone who has like a true entrepreneur mindset, right?
Yes.
Like,
Mhm.
because entrepreneur, at least in my view, is like you need to put the pieces together. It's all about problem solving. It's all about putting fires out. It's all about building, right? And so if you can connect the dots with whether it's your network or your prior professional background or whatever it is, and you've done that, and that's incredible. I mean, so there's a lot to unpack. So first is like, what was the response of these artists when Kristina comes up to them and is like, hey, so I have an idea. Take what you're doing and make a bonk or make a one hitter or whatever, the initial kind of product rollout was. What did they say?
You have to sort of sell them on the idea, like, how big is this problem, right? Like a lot of the ceramicists I was talking to, like, what do you need? Like 10 pipes, 20 pipes? And I'm like, no, like way more than that. So you sort of have to you have to like sort of convince them. This is like 2 years, and like the green rush was happening, states were legalizing, but a lot of these artists like were not consuming, or consumers. The one I currently work with, she's never consumed cannabis. So I was like, all right, listen, I really want to work with you. Like, this is how big the problem is, right? And we know women are the fastest growing segment in consumers right now in cannabis. 66% of women hide their cannabis consumption, right? So they want something chic, they want something beautiful, they want something they can put away, right? So I had to sell the artists on like, listen, this is a $2 billion problem, right? Like Tam, Sam, Som, you always have to pitch them like you do an investor, right?
Right.
And there were some of artists who were like, I get it, I'm doing it, like I'm all in. And then some artists were like, I just don't understand cannabis, I'm not there yet. But the artists that we work with now, because everything we do starts with the artist studio, like how to keep that in the DNA of my brand. I'm not ordering stuff from overseas and slapping my logo on it. Like everything we do starts in the artist studio.
That's awesome. Yeah. And then when you said like, some of them, I don't know if you said most or some, like they were prior consumers, or they are, right? Or they are consumers. And that makes a lot of sense because from a creativity standpoint, obviously, cannabis, THC in particular, really kind of gets the creative juices flowing, right? So I would imagine in some of those instances, those conversations were easy because they're like, hey, I'm on board. And yeah, I can make a badass apparatus, whatever it is, right? Yeah,
exactly. But some of one of the artists that we work with, who is our most, she does a lot of work for us. She's never consumed cannabis, but she gets the vision, right? Because she can appreciate a beautiful object to art. You know what I mean? Like she could, like, they understand what we're trying to do beyond beautiful stuff, right? Like anybody can create beautiful, but they understand like the message and the education and why we're doing this. So there's like a deeper reason. And I think that really resonates with them.
Totally. Yeah. And another thing that you said, and I want to dive into this in kind of two parts. So, the female or the women consumer adoption in terms of like, they're the fastest growing segment, right? So I'm not surprised. I've only heard that for the first time, like verbally, directly. And it makes sense because of all the like medicinal benefits, the therapeutic benefits that come with cannabis. Right. But I want to talk about the trends that you're seeing there. And then I also want to talk about and get your thoughts on the challenges as a woman, entrepreneur leading this business as the founder and CEO of this burgeoning business that you have of House of Puff. So I'll let you like first start with the consumers and then, we'll go from there.
Yeah, no, I love me some data. We're data nerds at House of
Me
Puff, and
too. Yeah.
Headset had come out with something that utterly blew my mind. In 2020, year over year sales for Gen Z, like that specific cohort, grew 151%. And I
Whoa.
was like, wait, what? 150? Like, first of all, I immediately got on TikTok. I was like, we need a TikTok, because that's where all
You're
that's where all
starting
the
to
Gen Zers
choreograph your
are.
dance and stuff, your dances, and start
Oh yeah,
practicing.
like well, we do it because every TikTok we would like post would get deleted because TikTok hates cannabis. So
Yeah.
now I figured out a way, and we give our pipes personalities. So we have like 8 different color one-hitter pipes, and every which one, it's hilarious. I have so much fun with it because I'm like, let's just do a TikTok today. But it's like resonating with that Gen Z, that specific cohort. Why? Because if you think about it, as they've been growing up, legalization's been happening, right?
True.
So they're
Yeah.
used to the destigmatization, like they're expecting cannabis is mainstream.
Right.
So that specific data like really sticks with us at House of Puff. So, we're on all the social channels, but we're also asking these women, like, what do you want to see? Like, what do you need? Like, well, how do you consume cannabis? And a lot of them are obviously sleep, anxiety, pain, but also like doing mundane like things around the house. Like I think it's like
Right.
30 to 40% of women who consume like do it like as they're just like doing household shit. And I'm like, I mean, that's what I do. Like, who wants to do the dishes not stoned? That's amazing. Like, I'll do all the dishes in the world. I'm a little bit high,
Right. It's an enhancement. It enhances your life. And that's part of the reason why I consume regularly, is that, like you said, there's mundane shit that you have to do as an adult. And hey, if taking a little puff of a joint or a one hitter or whatever is going to make you feel better and get you in a mindset of more positivity to complete that task, then why
Exactly.
not? Yeah.
Exactly. And to answer your second question about, being a woman in the cannabis space, listen, we all know the stats. I don't have to repeat them. We know that the white men are on top, but as a Latina woman in cannabis, it is really hard, especially when it comes to fundraising, right? The disbursement of money and cash to Latinas and people of color is what, it's 0.2%. It's something, the stat
Wow.
is horrendous, but I don't let that, because I lead a lot of our, we just finished raising a seed round that took 10 months, right? And it's like, I'll hop on with folks who just, my wife will like it. They don't get that. But, our lead investor, they sort of, they know what we're building, right? They are planning for the future that's going to happen, right? It's not if legalization is going to happen, it's when it's going to happen, right? We know
100%.
the end goal. And so we're teaming up with investors and organizations who understand that. And there's a lot of bad apples. We know that. But I always just go with my gut, and I surround myself with great people. So yes, do I wish that there were more women in cannabis? 100%. Do I wish there were more Black and brown people in cannabis? 1000%. But I have to keep showing up even when I don't want to. And so, we have a good little, group and support system, and we all support each other. And that's what it's really about,
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be the cream of the crop, right? And those individuals, those operators, those businesses, those brands are going to rise. And so I really like that mindset that you have, is just keep the blinders on. The work is not even close to being done yet. I mean, we're just at the starting point of
first inning. We are in the first inning.
First inning, exactly right. So that's great. And I think it's important that we have these types of conversations to generate awareness around these issues, particularly in the cannabis industry, because it's so new. And I know I've said this before, so apologies if you heard it, but it's like there's such a huge opportunity for cannabis right now to do things right? Like do it a different way than traditional industries have done in the past, which we've all come from and we don't like, right? We don't like some of that stuff. So culture changes, HR changes, the way the whole business operates. And also like you said, like the issues that matter, the women, the women that need to be also equal in terms of their status and their role within this industry, and the people of color, because they've been the ones that have been the most disenfranchised by the plant, for what, the past 100 years.
Like
So
if you're not doing everything that you can to right the wrongs of the war on drugs, get out of cannabis. And by the way, saying that you have like a DEI plan and just slapping that's not cutting it. So let's cut that out right now.
I totally agree. Yeah, 100%. And you can sniff those people out right away.
Yeah, for sure.
So I also want to talk to you about like overall, it seems like what you're doing with House of Puff is really a great avenue to break the stigma that's around cannabis, right? Because you described the bong that you hit the first time you tried cannabis, right? And it was like icky to you. It was like not your style. And I would imagine people that carry that same mindset or have that same particular taste in luxury items or whatever it is, that's an opportunity to educate those people and maybe bring them into the fold, right? As new consumers, and really show them some of the benefits of this plan, or even at least educate them at a minimum. So what are you seeing the markets doing to break the stigma, and what in particular, like specifically, is House of Puff doing to do that?
I'll answer the latter first, because that's easy. So my co-founder also came from the art world. And so that is weaved into the DNA of our brand. And so we use the power of art to create change. I'll give you a great example. So our rolling papers, I actually have them right here. So these are our Chris Wilson rolling papers. We license the artwork from artists, right? Artists that I've worked with, that I admire. We know a lot of artists, they need all the help they can get, the amplification. And so Chris Wilson, an artist that I met, was incarcerated when he was 17 years old. He was supposed to serve life in prison. He spent 117 days in solitary confinement, turned his life around, wrote a book about it actually called The Master Plan, is now like this super famous like artist and public speaker.
Wow.
Is incredible. But the artwork that we put on the rolling papers, called Positive Delusions, chronicles how he got himself through solitary confinement, right? So this idea, right? So we licensed the painting from him. So anytime we sell rolling papers, he gets a portion, right? And Solitary Watch is an organization trying to end solitary confinement. We also donate to them, right? So there's this beautiful sort of like ecosystem, right? It's a give back component, because they're not just pretty rolling papers. Like, of course they're pretty rolling papers. But what we're doing is we're amplifying the connection between legal cannabis and social justice. So that's sort of like, if I have to say where House of Puff sits, we're at the nexus of social justice, art, and cannabis. And that's it. That's who we are.
That's perfect, because that was going to be my next question, is like, what differentiates your particular cannabis accessories from the others? And wow, that's intense. That's amazing.
Yeah. So, it literally, it's just, we held an event for a month at Etain, one of the medical dispensaries in New York. And we brought all of his artwork to Etain, got a curator, Gregory Thornberry, from the New York Academy of Art. Like, I shit you not. Like, this is what we're doing in cannabis. And like, if you look at the photos on social media, online, whatever, you cannot believe that we're having this like art show, right? In a dispensary. Like, it just makes me, you have to pinch yourself, right? It's like, this makes me so happy. And this is why I'm an entrepreneur, and this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, and blood, sweat, and tears into this company, because it's making a difference. And that speaks to all consumers.
Yeah, I mean, art is supposed to tell a narrative. It's supposed to tell a story, right? I mean, I don't know if I'm supposed to. I guess I'm, speaking out of turn because I'm not in that industry. But I would imagine that there's some type of background or context, to kind of explain where the art's coming from, what the vision, where it all began. And so it's so beautiful that you're doing it in a way that is generating tons of awareness around the social justice issues through cannabis products.
Yeah,
I mean,
And Kevin, what I'll tell you is a second part of this, like what makes us different. You know, we have been bootstrapped this entire time, right? This has just been me and my co-founder with the money that we got. And we know the regulatory constraints that cannabis brands have, right? So like during the pandemic, when, you know, we were really launching in 2020, a lot of the dispensaries and boutiques that were carrying us closed, right? So I'm like, all right, like, what do we do? How do we reach our consumer? And we went from a digital reach of 46,000, right? So like, you know, Instagram, you know, very little newsletters. We did an editorial site, our blog, the drawing room, and then we went on YouTube. And then in 1 year, our digital reach 3.4 million. Like that's 74x.
Whoa.
So there are not a lot of cannabis brands paying attention to posting regularly on an editorial site or a blog or YouTube. Like I was shocked. Like if you go on YouTube right now, you type in how to roll a joint, a lot of what you'll see are men, right? So like, I'm not relating to that. I don't want to see some kid in his mom's basement trying to teach me how to roll a joint, right? I want to see, especially for a woman of color, right? If I'm trying to create this like frictionless experience for her, she wants to see my pretty ass manicure and my
and your rings
like,
and your,
I'm going to teach you how to roll a joint. You go on, I think we're number 7 on the most watched how to roll a joint videos, like above High Times and Rolling Stone, because we saw this sort of gap, this like video rich content where a lot of cannabis brands, they're not investing in, they really should be paying attention to.
Yeah. So it's funny you bring that video up because I watched it. I was looking at y'all's Instagram and I was like, hey, this is clever. I mean, it's, you know, there are other brands that have done it, but the fact that you're saying you're appealing to a specific audience because that is your brand persona, right? And I do agree with you in terms of like the missed opportunity with social media and cannabis brands right now. And like I live in the social media world. So that's I've been doing it for 11 years now for B2B tech brands and the like, and up and down any type of client you can think of. But it's like, I think where cannabis brands really miss the mark in terms of social media is they don't take the time to really think about their brand story, right? Like once you understand the story and the narrative or the messaging pillars that you want to focus on, like what you want to communicate, you know, from there, that's where the content becomes, that's where you create the content. And then it's an ever going, you know, will basically, because you know what you're posting. So often I'll see brands that are just posting to post. And it's like, okay, it's like, well, what exactly, like what message are you trying to tell? Like what you're there's one day you're in the greenhouse, the next day you're showing, you know, it's just, so I think you agree, right? Like, I mean, in terms of like,
I do. I think you can't appeal to everybody. And I think the most successful brands now and in the future, they will find their audience and their niche, and they will know how to appeal to them. And like listen, and we weren't perfect at first. I was like, oh, we got to be something to everybody. No, we don't. We just have to find our demo and speak to them and listen to them. What do they want to see from us? Right. Because like I can post all the things that I want to post, but maybe that's not resonating with my audience. Right. So you always have to listen. And I feel like so many times brands don't listen to their customers. And it's like, I don't know. It's crazy.
Have you been flagged at all by the notorious censorship of social media?
Yes, of course. I mean, I told you about TikTok, Instagram. We can't, do Facebook Shop. Our YouTube got one strike a few weeks ago. I mean, it's just, but that's why I so believe in this industry, because like we've been through it. We can't bank properly. We can't be on social media properly, but we're still here thriving, and we will continue. And so I love our community.
Yeah, I've said it before. It's the most resilient operators in any industry. You have to be. I mean, these people they don't give up, and we find a way, right? I mean, ingenuity in this industry is incredible. I mean, Delta 8 is thriving out here in HHC because in Texas, because THC is illegal, right? Like they're finding a way because there's an appetite for that, what THC provides. So as we wrap up, Kristina, I want to ask you, okay, because your brand House of Puff, your company is basically doing what we talked about in terms of educating and breaking the stigma and really generating awareness around very serious issues that need to be addressed as states continue to legalize. And so in your view, what is the role that cannabis brands should take on to help by destigmatizing this plant and really trying to normalize that, hey, this is good, this isn't all bad. Obviously it's an external substance that you can abuse, like just like anything else, but there's more good, I think, than bad, right? So how can brands do that?
Education. You have to educate your current audience and the audience that you don't even realize is listening to you, right? Because if people feel comfortable on a topic and they feel like they have all of the facts, right, they are more likely to maybe not even try, but at least listen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like just always at House of Puff, we always just start with every product we ever do comes with instructions, right? Everything we post on YouTube or our blog, we break it down really easy because yes, we do have folks who are the cannabis connoisseurs, but most of our customers, they're new to this, right? And so if we all band together and we're educating folks and we're speaking about it, especially like I'm a mom, right? And we're having honest conversations with our kids and we're normalizing this and we're rocking our House of Puff hats, like all of it, like community events. And I think, leaders in this space should also step up, right? And like, if there's somebody who, like a cousin of mine, is unhappy in her career, never consumed cannabis, is intrigued by the medicinal properties of everything going on, I'm educating her, like, listen, here are all the transferable skills that you currently have that you could apply into the cannabis industry. And so having conversations like that is also will help all of us. A rising tide lifts all boats, right?
Totally. Yeah. And it's so good that you mentioned that one part. Like, hey, these are transferable skills. This is a growing industry. There's going to be marketing departments. There's going to be sales departments. There's going to be IT departments. There's going to be staffing for HR. I mean, all that, and it's already happening, right? But it's just going to become more apparent in the future. So I couldn't agree more. Education is key, Kristina. And you sure are, spreading a lot of it with House of Puff. And this has been a great conversation. Is there anything that you want to leave the audience with before we wrap up?
Oh man, what a question. I would say, I think all of us in this space, we're all entrepreneurs, right? Again, this is a nascent industry. We're building it together. We have no idea what we're doing, but we're doing it together, right? So we can build it how we want to build it, right? We can set the ground rules and we can use entrepreneurship as a vehicle for community change. And I think that should be at the top of mind for everybody. And I'm really excited to be in the space. And this conversation was fantastic. And it was a pleasure to do this with you, Kevin.
Well, the pleasure is all mine, Kristina. I enjoyed it as well. Learned a lot, and I'm rooting for you, man. I know that people listening and watching are as well. I just can't wait to see how the brand evolves and expansion. And when that happens, I'd love to have you back on to talk shop again and just kind of
come visit us in New York. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yes, no, absolutely. When I'm in New York, I'll definitely look you up. Where can people find y'all's website and social media if they want to learn more about House of Puff?
For sure. So on Instagram, we're at the House of Puff, and our website's houseofpuff.com. I'm Kristina Adduci. So, DM me. I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to chat all things cannabis, entrepreneurship, and all that good stuff.
You heard it from her first, Kristina Lopez Adduci. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for listening. Bye.